The champagne glass was still warm when I picked it up. It wasn't mine. It was hers. She'd set it down for a moment to fix her lipstick. Red, always red. I stood beside the velvet curtain, clutching the glass like it meant something. It didn't. Not really. But it still had her fingerprints on it, and for reasons I don't fully understand, that stopped me from smashing it against the floor like I wanted to. No one knew I was there. That's the only reason this worked. The only reason I could just stand there, unseen, watching her swirl between guests like smoke. She was laughing again, head tilted, hand lightly resting on someone's arm, his arm. A stranger in a charcoal tuxedo who smiled like he already owned her. And maybe he did. Maybe he was the reason she stopped humming in the mornings. The reason she no longer wore the necklace I gave her on our first New Year's. The reason she changed her passcode 3 months ago and told me it was work policy. She leaned in to whisper something into his ear. His laugh cracked sharp through the air, and I felt it in my chest, like a bone trying to snap. I hadn't even been invited. The gala was for her firm, and I wasn't supposed to be part of that world anymore. She'd made that pretty clear. But I came anyway, not out of jealousy, not out of spite, but because I needed to see it with my own eyes, needed to know if the person she was when I wasn't around was the same one who still told me she loved me on autopilot before bed. Spoiler, she wasn't. She turned at one point. Pure accident. Her eyes landed on mine. And in that split second, before the performance kicked in, she froze. That's when I stepped forward. Slowly, quietly, like something out of a dream you regret the moment you wake up from it. She blinked. Her mouth parted just slightly. She reached out, instinctively. A gesture I used to find comforting. But not this time. Not again. I didn't touch her. I didn't say her name. I just set the glass on the table beside us and walked away before she could speak. Because this isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about recognition. And the moment you realize the person you love is no longer trying to be good at hiding. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I ended up sitting in my car 2 blocks away from the venue with the heater humming and my hands gripping the wheel like I was afraid I'd drift into traffic if I let go. The parking garage was almost empty by the time I left. My suit was wrinkled. My head hurt. But I didn't cry. I wish I could have cried. It would have meant there was something left to lose. Instead, I just sat there and stared at the passenger seat. At the envelope I hadn't planned on bringing, but couldn't leave behind either. Inside was the bracelet. A thin, gold chain with a tiny crescent moon charm. Simple, elegant, exactly her style. I bought it 2 months ago after seeing her eyes linger on one just like it in a window display downtown. I remember how she smiled that day. It wasn't forced. It wasn't calculated. It was just soft. Honest. I hadn't seen it since. But I never gave it to her. Because I found the other one first. Tucked behind the radiator in our guest bathroom, as if it had fallen accidentally. But I knew better. She hadn't had guests over in months. The cleaning lady quit in April, and I'd never seen that bracelet before. It was thicker, flashier, engraved on the inside with a name I didn't recognize. To L, always. M. Who the hell was M? I didn't confront her. Not then. What do you even say? Hey. I was snooping around behind the radiator like a deranged raccoon and found evidence that you might be emotionally vacant or just plain unfaithful. Thoughts? So I kept it. I kept the bracelet, the envelope, the questions. I buried all of it under layers of polite silence and fake smiles. That's what I'm good at, pretending I don't notice things that hurt. I've done it all my life. Childhood trained me well for that. But you can only pretend for so long. The night after the gala, she came home late. Her heels clicked against the hardwood like a metronome of guilt. She didn't know I had seen her. She didn't know I'd been there at all. She just walked in, dropped her clutch on the hallway table, and sighed the kind of sigh that tells you they're already somewhere else in their mind. She kissed me on the cheek. Cold, barely touched skin. I asked, was it a good night? She nodded, eyes already scanning her phone. Long. You know how these things are. I watched her scroll, and that's when it hit me. The way she stood. The angle of her wrist. The bare spot on her arm. She wasn't wearing any bracelet. Not the one I gave her. Not the one she hid. Not the one he gave her. It was like she didn't want to be anyone's property that night. Not even mine. And that terrified me more than anything else. Because it meant she was making room for someone new. The next morning, she left early. Too early. Her perfume lingered in the hallway longer than she did. A trail of bergamot and amber that used to make me feel wanted. Now it just felt artificial, like a scent pumped into a department store to keep you from noticing the exit signs. She claimed it was an off-site strategy meeting with the executive team. Said they were going to some retreat center in the hills for the weekend. I didn't ask questions. That's what she expected of me by now, to nod like I trusted her, to smile like I wasn't slowly decaying inside my own house. But I didn't go back to bed. Instead, I stood in the kitchen holding the coffee mug she forgot to rinse and stared at the lipstick mark on the rim. It wasn't the shade she wore last night. I know that sounds ridiculous, obsessive even, but I remember the details. I always do. She wore coral at the gala. This was crimson, which meant she changed after, which meant she'd gone somewhere else. The coffee had barely cooled when I was upstairs in her office, sitting in the creaky chair she told me not to touch. I booted her laptop. Password was the same, our wedding anniversary. She never changed it. I think part of her still believed I was too passive to dig this deep. And to be fair, I was. Until now. Her desktop was pristine. Not a single file out of place. But I knew better than to look where people want you to look. I opened the trash bin. Empty. Then I opened her private work folder. The one she swore was off limits because of NDAs and confidential client briefs. And that's when I saw it. A folder labeled Temp, Do Not Use. It was deleted. Or at least, it looked deleted. But MacBooks have a quirk. If you enable Quick Look Preview and don't close it properly, the system caches the most recent content, just enough of it, inside hidden memory. It's not full files, but it's fingerprints, ghosts. And what I saw wasn't work-related. Screenshots of conversations, photos taken in a hotel mirror, him behind her, shirtless, holding her waist. And then something that froze me. A document. Just one. Titled, Things I'll Say If He Finds Out. I stared at the title for a full 5 minutes before I opened it. It was a list. A numbered, bulleted list. All the lies, prepped and polished. It didn't mean anything. We were on a break. You were distant. It only happened once. He manipulated me. I was drunk. It was just texts. And then, the last line. Make him feel like it's his fault. He'll believe it. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just sat there in that overpriced ergonomic chair, reading the sentence over and over, trying to convince myself this was some kind of twisted fiction, some hypothetical drama she wrote for a marketing campaign. But deep down I knew this was real. She wasn't just planning how to lie. She was planning how to survive being caught. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't throw the laptop across the room or text her screenshots with some dramatic ultimatum. That's not who I am. I don't erupt, I erode. Slowly, quietly. And by the time anyone notices, the foundation's already gone. Instead, I backed out of the folder and cleared my digital footprints like I was never there. I even clicked around in some spreadsheets so her access history would look routine. When I was done, I placed everything back in perfect order. Chair angle, blinds position, even the mug ring she left beside her printer 3 days ago. Then I went to the hallway bookshelf and pulled down the dark green hardcover she hadn't touched in years. To anyone else, The Art of Strategic Thinking looks like the kind of book you keep on your shelf to feel smarter by osmosis. But inside, around page 147, taped behind the glossary, was an old SD card. One I bought the same year I proposed. Back then, it held nothing but pictures from our trip to the coast. But that night, it became something else. A backup drive. I copied everything. The ghost files, the folder tree, metadata timestamps, even the cached previews. I didn't know exactly what I would need, but instinct told me I couldn't afford to miss anything. Not this time. She came back 2 days later, glowing like she'd spent the weekend being worshipped in a candlelit temple. She brought lavender soap from the retreat and made a big deal about how the air up there was so cleansing. I watched her unpack. She folded everything perfectly, placed her used socks in a separate pouch, even lined her shoes up at the closet base like they had personalities. Every move choreographed. Elegant. Efficient. But she forgot one thing. The book. It had shifted slightly on the shelf. A single degree. Not enough for a stranger to notice, but enough for her. Noemi was obsessive about the bookshelf. Alphabetized by author, color-coded by spine shade. It was her one weird quirk I found strangely charming. She always said books deserve to be seen in harmony. The moment her eyes passed the spot, I saw it. The twitch. The flicker of her brow. But she said nothing. Just smoothed the hem of her blouse and asked if I wanted to order Thai. I said sure. That night, we ate in silence. She scrolled. I pretended to scroll. Every few minutes, she'd glance up at me, not with suspicion, but calculation. Like she was trying to measure how much I knew. Whether the script she'd written in that, if he finds out, document needed to be deployed or not. She didn't know yet, and I wasn't going to give her any clues. I've spent most of my life being underestimated. Too quiet, too soft, too safe to be a threat. But the thing about people like me, people who live in their own heads for long stretches, is that we learn to notice the smallest patterns. We memorize emotional rhythms the way others memorize passwords. And when the beat changes, we hear it before the first note hits. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I waited until she passed out, silk robe, a mask, her favorite white noise app playing ocean waves on low volume. Then I walked back to her office and opened the drawer she thought I'd never dare touch. Inside was a planner. One of those thick leather-bound ones with gold-edged pages and a strap that snapped shut. No digital trail. No app. Just ink. Old school. Private. I opened to the most recent week. What I found wasn't a schedule. It was a record. But not of work. Of him. Just his first initial, M. Always M times. Locations. Hotels. Parking levels. Door codes. She wasn't just cheating. She was documenting it. And suddenly, I realized this wasn't just about romance. This was about control. A controlled narrative. A controlled fallout. A controlled explanation if I ever pushed back. She had options. Alibis. Angles. Even exit routes. But she made one mistake. She assumed I had none. I spent the next 2 days letting her perform. Every kiss, every joke, every manufactured moment of intimacy. I let it happen. I even played along. I complimented her new haircut, asked about her latest project at work, and pretended I cared when she droned on about the executive team's lack of synergy. I listened. I nodded. I laughed in all the right places. But inside, I was documenting everything. Not on paper. Not digitally. I didn't need to. It was all going into a vault I was building inside myself. A meticulous archive of lies, glances, time gaps, and script recitations. Because once you realize someone is acting, you stop reacting. You start watching. I started noticing things I'd overlooked before. Like how she never asked follow-up questions anymore. I could tell her I'd quit my job and taken up carpentry, and she'd say, "That's nice, babe," without blinking. Her responses were no longer based on what I said. They were based on the version of me she assumed still existed. That's when I realized she wasn't with me anymore. She was with a hologram she'd created and programmed to be manageable, predictable, boring, something she could justify betraying. And I had been playing that role perfectly. Until now. She made it easy. On Thursday night, she left again. Said she was going to dinner with Liv, one of her coworkers. She even threw in an eye roll and muttered something about how Liv always picks awful restaurants with overpriced tapas. The kind of detail meant to humanize a lie. I didn't call her out. I just waited. And when the door closed behind her, I went to her closet. I wasn't looking for lingerie or some cliché red flag. I was looking for silence. The kind of silence that happens when something's missing. And there it was. A pair of heels she only wore when she wanted to be noticed. Patent leather, razor-thin stilettos, dust-free and freshly wiped. Gone. I smiled. Then I opened the safe behind the shoe rack. She didn't know I knew the code. But people always reuse numbers that matter to them, not to the people around them. It wasn't our anniversary. It was her mother's birthday. Inside, tucked beneath the deed to the condo and a stack of old receipts, was a burner phone. Jet black. No case. No background photo. Just one app. Messages. The screen lit up without a password, reckless, even for her. And there they were. Messages to M. Not romantic. Not lately. That phase had passed. These were tactical. Same room as last time. Will he be home Friday? I think he suspects. I'll redirect. Redirect. The word hit harder than anything else. She wasn't just lying to me. She was steering me. Like a plane being rerouted midair, unaware the ground was getting closer. But here's the part she hadn't calculated. I wasn't going to crash. Not anymore. I took the phone. Not to confront her. To use it. To respond. And I did. I typed. Let's meet tomorrow. I want to talk. No more hiding. Then I deleted the sent message from the thread, left the inbox looking untouched, and put everything back exactly as I found it. I even left her a little note on the fridge. Don't forget dinner with Liv. Hope the tapas are edible this time. Because sometimes the best way to expose a lie is to feed it. The next evening, I didn't ask where she was going. She gave me her usual soft kiss on the cheek and a rehearsed sigh about live and small plates and overpriced cocktails, like I hadn't heard the same script 3 times before. I smiled, told her not to drink too much, and watched her grab the same black clutch she always used when she needed it to look like a casual night out. The door closed behind her, and I didn't move. Not right away. I sat still on the couch, the TV flickering through a rerun of some show we used to watch before we stopped watching anything together. It played to an empty room while I counted in my head. 10 minutes. 15. 20. Then I got up. I already knew the address. It was in the planner, a subtle note next to a penciled M. She was smart enough not to write full names, but not smart enough to leave out the room number. Davenport Suites, room 614. She must have thought I'd never look. Or that if I did, I wouldn't do anything with what I found. I arrived just after 8 p.m. The hotel was expensive, but not ostentatious. The kind of place executives use when they don't want to be photographed. I parked 2 blocks away and walked, hands in pockets, hood up, face down. Not that anyone was looking. That's the beauty of cities. No one cares unless you give them a reason. At the front desk, I gave the name Martin Hale. She had used it before. A note in her planner. M. Hale. At the time I thought it was just his name. But now I understood, it was a shield. A placeholder. An identity used enough to exist, but not enough to be traced. The clerk looked me over, barely paying attention, then handed me a key card without asking for ID. Room 614. I took the elevator in silence. No music, just the hum of rising floors and my heartbeat starting to slow, not from fear, but from something colder. Anticipation. The hallway smelled like citrus and ammonia. I moved quietly, pausing once outside the door, pressing my ear gently to the wood. Voices. Not loud. Muted. I waited. Then I knocked. The lock clicked, and the door opened. But it wasn't her. It was a man. Mid-40s. Clean-cut. Confident in the way only someone with power can afford to be. He wore a dress shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, no tie. He didn't look surprised to see me, just mildly annoyed. "Can I help you?" he asked, like I was a misplaced room service tray. I stared at him. For a moment, I wanted to say everything. Shove my evidence in his face. Ask him if he knew what she really was. If he even cared. But then something strange happened. He stepped back and motioned me inside, as if he'd been expecting someone. Not me, clearly, but someone adjacent enough that my presence didn't immediately register as a threat. I walked in. The room was dim. 1 lamp. 1 half-empty glass of scotch. Her coat draped over a chair. Her phone charging beside the bed. But she wasn't there. "Are you here for her?" he asked. Calm. Direct. I didn't answer. He smiled, almost sad. "She's running a little late. Always does that. Builds tension. It's part of her process." I blinked. Process? That word hit me sideways. Like this wasn't a love affair at all, but something else. Something rehearsed. Repetitive. Almost clinical. "Who are you?" I finally asked. He chuckled and extended his hand. Martin Hale." I didn't take it. He didn't seem offended. Instead, he walked to the window, looked out over the city like he was bored. "You're not the first," he said. "But you're the first one to show up before she's done with you." I felt my stomach knot. What does that mean? He turned, tilted his head, and said it like he'd been waiting for someone to finally ask. "She collects people. Doesn't care how long she keeps them. Just how well they perform." I opened my mouth to respond, to demand clarity, answers, truth, but I heard the sound of heels in the hallway. Click, click, click. Her rhythm, her entrance. She didn't know I was there, and I wasn't sure what I'd do when she opened that door. But I knew one thing for certain. She had scripts, but I just met someone who knew the whole playbook. The door opened with that slow, deliberate creak you only hear in hotels trying too hard to be quiet. The hallway light spilled into the room like a secret trying to sneak past the frame. Her silhouette appeared first, elegant, rehearsed, almost cinematic. And then she saw us. Me, standing stiff near the minibar. Martin, sitting calmly in the armchair, swirling his drink like nothing about this was remotely unusual. Her whole body tensed in an instant. Not panic, not guilt, but something closer to calculation. "Wow," she said, blinking slowly. "This is unexpected." She didn't look at me. Not directly. She looked at the space around me, like I was just a shadow she hadn't accounted for in her lighting setup. "You're early," Martin said, voice casual. She stepped inside, closed the door, and leaned against it like this was just another odd business meeting. Noemi always had the gift of slipping into character, but I could see it now. Her mind was racing behind her eyes, parsing the threat, searching for leverage. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" I asked quietly. She tilted her head. "Find out what?" Still performing. Still playing the part of the woman who had everything under control. But I had her planner, her burner phone, her list of excuses. I had her playbook. And more importantly, I had him. Martin didn't look at her when he spoke next. "He's not here to fight for you, Noemi. He's here to understand what you are." Something shifted in her expression. Not fear. Not yet. But the briefest flicker of something I hadn't seen in years. Recognition. She'd lost control of the scene. "That's dramatic," she said softly, dropping her clutch onto the desk and slipping out of her coat. Her dress tonight was deep navy, minimal, no jewelry. It was designed to blend, to distract, to disarm. She turned to me, eyes softening. "Elric, whatever this is." "Don't," I cut in. My voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. "Don't lie. Not tonight." Martin raised his glass. "To honesty, then." She rolled her eyes at him, and it was the first genuine expression she'd shown since entering the room. "I told you not to get involved," she said sharply. "I was involved the moment you started writing scripts about how to spin your betrayal," I said. Silence. Long, weighty silence. Then, finally, she sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. No pretense. No seduction. Just exhaustion. "You really don't understand," she said to me, voice quieter now. "None of you ever do." "You mean the others?" I asked. "The ones like Martin? The ones you keep notes on? Hotel codes, door instructions, time slots?" She flinched. Slightly. Barely. But enough. Martin leaned forward. "I'm not angry, Noemi. You're a fascinating case study. You're not cruel. Just clinical." She turned to him, like a blade turning toward light. "Don't psychoanalyze me." "Too late," he smiled. "I'm not your victim anymore. And neither is he." That's when she stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. And for the first time, her voice cracked with something real. "You came here thinking this was about cheating. You thought you'd catch me, corner me, shame me into confession." She took a step closer. "But this was never about romance. Not for a long time." I didn't speak. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't ashamed. She was relieved. Relieved that the game was over. That she no longer had to pretend. And then she said something I'll never forget. "I don't cheat because I'm broken. I cheat because it gives me proof. Proof that people only see what they want. And that love? Love is just a mask that stops working the second you look too close." I looked at Martin. He didn't seem shocked. Just tired. "How many?" I asked. She blinked. "What? How many versions of me have you done this to?" She opened her mouth, closed it, smiled, and said nothing. She didn't answer my question. She didn't need to. That smile was enough. The kind of smile someone gives when they know the game is rigged and they're holding the only deck with blank cards. I realized, in that moment, Noemi wasn't waiting to be caught. She was waiting to see who would understand her and still stay. And I had. For far too long. Martin stood and buttoned his shirt. He looked at her one last time, then at me, and for the first time since I met him, there was no smugness in his face. Just sympathy. "She doesn't lose," he said. "But she also never wins. She just keeps going." Then he left. No slam of the door. No dramatic line. Just the quiet sound of shoes on hotel carpet, fading into something that no longer concerned me. And that left just us. Me and her. Two people in a hotel room full of shadows. She turned to me, arms folded. "So what now? Are you going to shout? Tell me what a monster I am." "No," I said. She tilted her head. "No? I'm going to go home," I continued. "Pack a bag and leave. Not because I hate you. Not because I want to punish you. But because I finally love myself more than I need you to love me." That got her. Not deeply. Not enough to break her. But enough for the mask to flicker. "Elric," she started, stepping forward. "You don't have to do this dramatically. We can talk. Fix it." "There's nothing to fix," I said. "You spent more time writing exit strategies than memories." I just finally caught up. She said my name again. Softer this time. A whisper loaded with pretend sorrow. But it didn't land. Because I'd already walked to the door. And before I left, I turned to her one last time. You were right, you know. About what? She asked. That love is a mask, I said. But sometimes, when you take it off, you don't find a monster underneath. You find someone who forgot what they looked like. And with that, I walked away. Into the elevator. Out of the hotel. Out of the web. I didn't go home that night. I didn't even go to a friend's. I drove until the city lights faded behind me, until the silence no longer echoed her voice. I watched the sun rise through a fogged windshield with a gas station coffee in my hand. And for the first time in years, my chest didn't feel like it was being held hostage by a smile I had to fake. There was no revenge, no outburst, no dramatic final word, just freedom. And sometimes, that's the most powerful ending of all.